Hello and welcome to the July edition of the Bloody Scotland Book Club. I'm Abir Mukherjee, author of the Wyndham and Banerjee series of novels set in Raj era India, and I'll be your host for this evening. Tonight, I am joined by three wonderful guests, and together we'll be reviewing three books by Heather Darwent, Michael J. Malone, and Liz Nugent. We'll be taking you on a bit of a Celtic journey, ranging from Edinburgh to the Ayrshire coast and over the sea to Ireland. We'll be in the company of university students, a widower offered a second chance at happiness, and a young, rather strange woman who's just lost her father. But this is a live and interactive book club, and your participation is vital. So before I introduce you to my guests and to the books, I want to thank you for joining the book club. Thank you if you've maybe read some of the books. And whether you have or not, please do put your questions and comments in the chat function on your screen, and we'll do our best to factor them into the discussion. We'll go through each book one at a time, and we'll also hear from each of the authors reading from their books. So without further ado, on with the show. Tonight, I am joined by an amazing panel. I have Sharon Bairden, Alex Hawley, and Fiona Buchanan. Let me introduce them one by one. By day, Sharon Bairden has a passion for human rights as she manages a small independent advocacy service, but by night, she turns her thoughts to the dark side as a writer and a blogger. Sharon writes dark psychological thrillers such as Sins of the Father and You Need Me, and she blogs about crime fiction over at Chapter in My Life. Welcome, Sharon. Next up, we have Alex Hawley, who is a former blogger who attends festivals and regularly writes reviews. As of this week, Alex is also a published author under the name A.J. Hawley. His book, The Two Writers, One Story, is about his journey as a disabled writer en route to getting published. Congratulations, Alex. I mean, it's quite a week for you.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And your second book, which will be published soon, centres around domestic violence. So you'll have one or two things to say about some of our books today, I would imagine.
Michael J. Malone is actually in the second book.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, we'll have to talk about that when we discuss his book. And last, but certainly not least, we have Fiona Buchanan. It doesn't matter if it's Jane Eyre or Jane Doe, William Shakespeare or William McIlvanney, Anne of Green Gables or Anne Cleeves, Fiona Buchanan will read it. And if the book involves a crime scene, an overworked and cynical detective, and a fight for the truth and justice, she'll be there. Having been involved in the background of Bloody Scotland since it first started, Fiona is delighted to be a reader for the McIlvanney Prize longlist. Welcome, Fiona. How do you have time to do anything else?
Other than read. Oh,
well, joining us on the book club is what I mean. How, with everything else on, how do you find time for this?
No, it's something to make time for, isn't it? It's good fun.
Brilliant. Well, welcome to you all, and welcome to those of you at home. So tell me, panelists, how is July treating you? Are you all having a good summer?
Yes, it's been excellent book festival season. So
it is. Have you been to many festivals yet?
Harrogate, I write. Looking forward to Bloody Scotland. Hoping to get over to Butte for a wee day trip. And
And Alex, I saw you at Harrogate.
Yeah, it was rather surreal. I had a half an hour Q&A when I launched my book in front of 40 people.
Well, that must have been quite an experience. That's your first time launching your book. That must have been something quite special.
Just a little bit crazy, yeah.
Cool. Well, we've still got the highlight of the festival season to look forward to. Bloody Scotland in September. I trust you'll all try and make your way there.
I'm here anyway, so
good.
Wouldn't miss it for the world.
Alex, you going to do your best?
I shall be there digitally, yes. I'll be in the audience asking loads of good questions if I can, yeah.
Brilliant. And I hope all of you at home, if you can make it, please do. And if you can't, well, as Alex said, there is a digital pass. So please do try and join us. Now, before we get things moving, I'm just going to ask a quick question. Have you all got a drink? Are you all happy? Yeah. And those of you at home, if you've got a drink, be ready with it because we're about to start now. I always feel like a book club needs a drink. I haven't actually got one today, but never mind. We'll carry on. Our first book tonight is The Things We Do to Our Friends by Heather Darwent. Let me just read from the blurb first before we talk to the author. Claire arrives at the University of Edinburgh with a secret. This is her chance for a blank slate to find the right people and reinvent herself. And then she meets Tabitha. Tabitha is charismatic, beautiful, and intimidatingly rich. Soon, Claire is sucked into her enigmatic circle of friends and their dizzying world of champagne on rooftops and summers in France. Her new life has begun. Then Tabitha reveals the little project they're working on, a project they need Claire's help with. And Claire can't say no because they know what she did. An intoxicating feminist page-turner, this novel will take you on a journey from Edinburgh's dazzling spires to the dripping staircases and dark alleyways of its underbelly. Sounds fascinating. Before we start, let's hear from author Heather Darwent reading from her book.
1. Edinburgh. I've decided to look back and make some kind of sense of it all. And the initial idea of starting to put the pieces together in one place was because Tabitha's mother asked me to write it all down, so she had something of Tabitha's, a tangible record of her life for the extended family. But I couldn't quite bring myself to cobble together a fictional account where we were normal students who did normal things. So I ended up giving her a vague excuse, and she didn't ask again. But the idea wouldn't die down once she'd brought it up. And I thought, why not? Why shouldn't I go back over what happened for my own purposes? Then the question was, where does the tale begin? And although there are other places that may seem more logical, September 2005 feels right. My arrival. How very dramatic that sounds. But it felt dramatic at the time. September is a month that has a special anticipation associated with it, as the leaves turn and the nights darken. The first time you crack open a book, cracking the spines, smoothing down the pages so they can't spring back up. It's a month that means fresh beginnings. And that only happens a few times in life, when the slate is wiped clean and the story is ready for you to begin and tell it how you wish. The first day of a job when you're cautious and rule-abiding. Or with a new partner when you share appealing parts of yourself to test the reaction. At university it is even more of an opportunity. Nobody knows who you are. There are no expectations or preconceptions. How you answer each question and how you position yourself is entirely up to you. But it needs to begin somewhere, and for me it was Edinburgh at Waverley Station. I was ready to move, so desperate to leave Hull for good. But it was hard not to feel a little discouraged when I stepped off the train and strode out into the city. I was expecting post-summer blustery days with the warmth still in the air, but the weather was particularly bad that year. I thought of my granny and what she'd say in that scornful tone. It's just a few hours away, Claire. I don't know why you expected it to be so different. How grey the old town was. It was magnificent, but there was an underlying sense of squalor below it all. Steps led to alleys weaving with possibility, where you could just as easily find a grand square as you could a dead end and a seagull gnawing on scraps of cold chips. I remember the magnitude of scale when I walked along to Queen Street and stared down to the new town. And the views went all the way to the Firth of Forth, a glimpse of water, but the winds were quick and soon a dampish fog obscured it all, like a bundle of laundry pulled dripping from the washing machine then pinned up. I ignored the weather. I was determined to stay optimistic about the whole thing.
There you are. What an opening. Who would like to lead us off on this discussion? I'm looking at you, Fiona.
Okay.
Champion this book. Tell us what you thought of it.
Well, first of all, I love the book and I can't wait to read her next one. The difficult second novel is that. With the prologue, it was set in France and it provides a disturbing, ambiguous scenario, the implications of which are taking the reader in one sordid, awful direction, and then they swiftly turn to one that's even worse. And I think this is a good guide to the way the author is going to play with the reader and keep the characters and the plot twisting throughout. We meet Claire. She's a first-year student at Edinburgh University, and from the outset, you know that she's got something to hide, guessing that it fits with the prologue, but not quite sure where. It's apparent she's struggling to reinvent herself, and she views the world as though she's not part of it, and she's finding ways to change to fit in so as not to be noticed. Her appearance, her language, her interests, all the while though she's on the outside looking in. And throughout the book, Edinburgh's there, providing a moody grey atmospheric backdrop to the story with its closes and streets, and these are providing places for Claire to hide. She takes a bar job and will learn that she's in the impoverished end of the Edinburgh students. The job gives her a form of a social life, including her relationship with the bar owner, Finn. And it's in the cocktail bar and the grass market that she meets a group of people whose looks and behaviour she admires and dislikes in equal measures. For them, money's no object, and their words and actions are loud and privileged. And despite wanting to remain anonymous, Claire's drawn in. It's spinning a glittering web that pulls Claire in, as well as the existing friends, Imogen, Eva and Sam, is Tabitha, and she weaves stories that might or might not be true, and gradually tests are set for Claire. It's only once she's passed in some way indiscernible to her that she's invited to Tabitha's mother's house in France, and it's there that the business proposal is revealed. Tabitha has got a bewitching power over her friends, and they're known as the Shiver, referring to their shark-like behaviour, and she's keeping safe information that increases her hold on them, as well as their vulnerability to her charms, as they compete to be her chosen one. The friendship circle, each member's boundaries and the extent that they'll go to appease or please Tabitha are constantly being tested. The group's dark business takes over from university life, but only Tabitha holds all the cards, with the rest carefully keeping their own sets of secrets. Gradually, it becomes apparent to Claire that within the Shiver, someone knows her past, and as little clues are released, the next chapter's heightened tension as the business takes off, but becomes riskier and riskier. The glimpses we're given of Claire's past life help us to understand her need to be accepted and the lengths she'll go to for friendship and affection. And while this helps the reader to understand the magnitude of what she's trying to escape, the big question is, can she? And despite her glitzy friends, is she still the same underneath? Can she shake off her upbringing and her story? Can any of us?
Wow. Well, who would like to chip in here? Alex, what did you think of it?
Well,
thank you for, I should say, sorry, Fiona, thank you so much for that. Some précis of the points of the book. Now, Alex, what did you think of it?
To be honest, it did make me think of my own university years, because I started in 2006 myself. So it's quite accurate in the machinations, I would say. Only I will say mine wasn't as dark as this.
So you didn't get involved in those sorts of projects then, shall we say?
No, the business side within this book was somewhat surreal and I'd say rather highfalutin. But when you find out how dark the story gets and why it gets like that, all the secrets that Fiona was talking about, you can understand it. But for me, it was slightly slow to start with, but as it picked up and you found out how dark it was getting, it was well worth the read, and you could see why, as well as being shortlisted for Michael Benedetto, Val also chose it for New Blood, because it's distinctly different from lots of books that have tried to do the same theme, but not as scary as this. And you did feel really sorry for Claire in the end, but her dark background was well hidden too.
Sharon, what were your first thoughts on this?
I just noticed that in the chat, Louise Colvin said that the book gave her such an atmospheric feel of suspense. And, I was drawn in by how the outstanding writing, right? There's absolutely no doubt about it. This book deserves, its place in that list. I loved the toxic characters, the darkness, that it was a visual read. So, the pages kind of came alive as you were reading it. I think the one thing for me, and you kind of picked up on that there, Alex, was sometimes I felt it a little bit slow. Just the pacing was just a little bit slow for me. But I think that's a sort of personal preference. And while I was reading it, I was thinking of a friend of mine, and I thought, she would devour this book. She loves, she loves that imagery, that description, that visual and sort of visceral. It's actually quite grotesque at times sometimes in the book, which were the parts that I really enjoyed. The darker the better for me. So yeah, I absolutely thought it was a fantastically well-written book. Loved the characters. I just personally felt for me that the pace was just a wee bit too slow.
I must say, I mean, let's pick up on the writing. I couldn't believe this is a debut.
Yeah.
The prose is wonderful. It's so assured, and as you were saying, Fiona, I mean, it really makes us look forward to the next book. If a writer's debut can be this assured, it bodes well for the future. But let's talk a wee bit about the book and some of the things that I found really interesting. I love this sort of this thing at the beginning where she says that you only have a few chances in life to reinvent yourself, and university is one of those chances. Did anybody find that appealing? Did anybody look back and think, I did that, or I should have done that?
Is it not quite interesting how few of us do change? We go, that where we do get new opportunities, that we just actually head off and be the same person. I don't think very many of us actually take that opportunity as wildly as we could. But perhaps at university age, we don't realise we could.
I don't know.
Well, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I think there is an element of reinventing yourself every time you start a new chapter. Possibly we don't reinvent ourselves to the same extent that Claire did, because thankfully we've not got the same dark backstory there. But yeah, I kind of feel that I've reinvented myself a few times over the years. Sometimes I wish I'd been a bit more bolder about it. Don't know who I would become.
Let's talk about the setting, because Edinburgh is obviously a setting that we know well from in the world of crime fiction. What was done? What spoke to you about Edinburgh? Was there anything done differently here? Is there anything that really appealed to you? Because as we said, the prose, the atmosphere was amazing, and that was down. A lot of that was down to setting. So, what did Edinburgh mean to you in this book? How was Edinburgh depicted, and did it stand out?
I like the jumping between the old town and the new town, and the old town being the sort. I found that the place that Claire could hide best and was maybe more suited to her, and that she was a visitor in the new town, and that was where she didn't know if she could be accepted there.
And did the new town and the old town sort of reflect almost different lives, or her different lives, her sides of her personality, or the way she was trying to reinvent herself?
She's like a bit like a hermit crab trying out things, isn't she? she's trying. What can she? Where are her boundaries as this person that she wants to be? And she was. I feel that she was trying. She was being different. She was a different person with the flatmates. She was a different person with Finn, and she was a different person with the shiver.
Do we do that? Are we different in different groups?
Oh yes, definitely.
Oh, yeah, people will always say that. I hug people at book things. Other areas I've got a hula hoop around me. So yeah, definitely different in different groups.
Now, Rose Provinciano says that she found it too realistically dark. Do we have any comments on that?
I don't think you can go too dark in crime fiction. You either go over the top and people don't finish it, but they've already bought the book. So
yeah, I think what you've got is, I mean, there's people like different things, and it wasn't too dark for me. It was certainly something that it was on the darker end of things, but it was definitely something that I enjoyed and I would recommend. The comparison that one has to make here, initially is with The Secret History to a degree. Now, what would you say to people? Is this similar? Is it different? How would you rate this next to what is essentially one of the tomes of our genre, one of the best books in our genre?
Sadly, I haven't read Secret History by Donna Tartt yet. I will be doing soon.
Yeah, well, you have to, right?
I'll join you in that, Alex.
Okay, well, that was a bad question for you, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry.
Let's get some of the other feedback. Yvonne Stanton says that she really enjoyed this book, and I can understand that. Alison Campbell says she's just finished it and she enjoyed it for the most part. There were a little too much foreshadowing, but otherwise she loved the depiction of Edinburgh, and she thought it was really good. Before we finish on this one, let's because I have a 2 thumbs method of judging a book. Would you say this is 2 thumbs, 1 thumb, 1.5 thumbs? What do we think, jury? What are you going to give this book?
1.5 for me.
1.5.
1.5 for me. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not bad. That's 3 and 2 is 5 out of a possible. What's that? 5 out of a possible 6. That's an A. We'll take that. It's quite sad that it took me that long to figure out how to add up to 5 or 6, isn't it? I apologise for that.
I'm glad you've done that, Abir.
Well, man, I was an accountant, so I should be able to do better than that. I do apologise to our audience. I should be able to count to 5 or 6 quicker than that. Shall we move on to our next book? Yeah. So next up, we have A Suitable Lie by Michael J. Malone, who is a friend of the festival. It's somebody we know well, and he's one of our greatest Scottish writers, crime writers at the moment. So let's talk a wee bit about this book. The blurb says, Andy Boyd thinks he is the luckiest man alive. Widowed with a young child, and after his wife has died in childbirth, he's certain that he'll never again experience true love. Then he meets Anna, feisty, fun, beautiful. She's his perfect match, and she loves his son like he's her own. When Andy ends up in hospital on his wedding night, he receives the first clue that Anna is not all that she seems. Desperate for that happy ever after, he ignores it. A dangerous mistake that could cost him everything. This has been described as a brave, deeply moving, page-turning psychological thriller. A Suitable Lie marks a stunning change for one of Scotland's finest crime writers, exploring the lengths which people will go to hide their deepest secrets, even if it kills them. Now, there is a twist in this book. It's not what you expect in terms of domestic violence, but before we talk about it, let's hear Michael reading from the book.
Hello there, my name is Michael J. Malone, and I'm reading a short excerpt from my novel, A Suitable Lie, for the Bloody Scotland Book Club. Thank you for having me. Here's the prologue. I don't know how long I walked for. My heels slammed onto concrete until they almost went numb. Fists tight in my pocket, I walked and walked and walked. Light from a shop window spilled onto the pavement just in front of me. What was the shop doing open at this hour? For the first time I noticed my calves were so cold they had no feeling in them. My watch read 6:30. I'd been walking for hours wearing only boxer shorts and a t-shirt under my coat. On my feet a pair of mule slippers. What the hell was I thinking? The shop door opened and a small man came out and propped an advertising board for a newspaper against the wall. He stared at me as if I was an idiot searching for a village. The newspaper headline on the board read, Divorced Dad Kills Kids. I stumbled to a halt. What on earth would drive a man to do such a thing? Only an extreme emotion would result in such a dreadful action. Was it desperation? Anger? Jealousy? A disturbed mind's version of an act of love? The banner blazed like a warning. I would have to find a solution. I would have to find a way out of this trap. At last my circuit brought me home. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and walked inside. Pausing by the living room door, I saw her, curled up in a chair, fast asleep. Even in the weak light, I could make out the silted lines of mascara that ran from her eyes and down the pale expanse of her cheeks, almost past her nose. She'd obviously fallen asleep waiting for me, and that was the first time I thought about murder.
There we have very atmospheric opening. That was a prologue from A Suitable Lie. And who is going to lead off on this one? Sharon. Sharon has her hand up. Come on, Sharon, tell us a wee bit about this book and what your thoughts are.
I absolutely loved this book. This is the second time. So I read the book when it first came out, and I read it again for tonight's event. There's probably in the audience, I know you said that there's a twist there, and I think Michael kind of hints at the twist at the beginning, but this book it's harrowing. For me, I was furious when I read it the first time, and I thought, I wonder if I'm going to be furious again when I read it the second time, and I was absolutely livid when I read it, because for me it highlighted the gaps, and this is where you need to be careful I don't get my soapbox too much, so mute me if I do. It highlighted the gaps in services for people. It highlighted the stigma that still exists in our society.
I think we can mention it because it's not.
Can we mention it? Yeah, because
otherwise, yeah.
Yes, because otherwise it's kind of really hard to talk about if you don't. But it highlights lack of support for men who are victims of domestic abuse. That whole idea where in social media, we may still see an image of a woman hitting a man over the head, and we all laugh. We're all encouraged to laugh, and that always infuriates me, because I think if that was turned on its head, there'd be an outcry. I think before we went live, Fiona, you said that you had to put the book up and down a few times because it was so harrowing, and I think it was the violence within the book, although not gratuitous, it was so measured, but the pace was quite alarming, where it drew you right into Andy's life. It made it really chilling. That description of domestic violence was disturbing, and it was unnerving. And to see Andy struggle, I think there's a scene in the hospital where a drunk guy talks about his wife hitting him, and Andy laughs at that. At the same time, it's pretty ironic the reason he's in hospital on his wedding night. Anna was a fascinating character as well, because as we got at Anna's Andy's wife, and there was something really vulnerable about her as well. She was really complex. That on the surface, there was that loyal, loving wife and mum to Andy's son, but underneath that darkness and the rage that she couldn't control. And as a reader, and probably as a female, I felt quite torn at times between feeling sorry for her and understanding why she acted the way she did. And I was constantly questioning myself, would have felt sorry for Andy if the story had been the other way around. I think Michael is a brilliant writer, and I think with all these characters, and especially in this book, he really highlights the vulnerability that makes us human. Throughout Andy being at his work, trying to hide everything that was happening in his life, and at the same time there was Sheila, the woman that he worked beside, was also a victim of domestic violence from her husband. And there was points where you thought Andy was going to open up to her, and I was almost screaming to the book, saying, "Please tell her what's happening, tell her what's going on." So that whole idea of the social stereotypes and the understanding that we have for females, but the stigma that's still attached to men who are victims, and the lack of support that's out there. And I know from speaking to Michael, as part of his research into this book, that he had looked for, what support systems are available for male victims, and trying to find out what existed was, almost impossible. So yeah, I think I remember I wrote a review of it, and I said, it tore my heart, and my stomach churned, and I actually felt, that I lived and breathed Andy's life throughout the pages. You could feel every single blow and the terror as the violence escalated. you could sense that feeling of isolation and how trapped that he felt, because he really did feel he had no way out. He wanted to retaliate, but he was afraid to, because he was afraid of hurting her and afraid of the message that society, you know, how he was brought up, not to attack women. And I did struggle with my feelings of sympathy for Anna. Although I sympathised with her, I struggled with my sympathy for her. So yeah, I think this is a book that raises so many questions, so many points of discussion. And it just, one of my all-time favourite books.
Well, let's discuss some of those points. Sharon, you had problem reading this book because it is quite visceral, and I suppose in a way that's the mark of an author at the top of their game, when they can cause these emotions within you. Now, what did you think of it, Fiona?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with a lot of what Sharon just said. I really did struggle with the way that the violence erupted, the snap into it. I found it, I suppose, if I have one query, and I don't know, Sharon, if it ever occurred to you, why did the violence just start after the wedding? How did she manage to contain that up until the wedding?
I think she was trying to create a life for herself, and I definitely think there was an insight in there. She knew the issues she had, and I think she was trying to create this alternative life for herself. And by having that ring on her finger, she potentially felt that that was that safety net. And once she was there, she kind of knew, she manipulated the situation a few times with, police involvement and things, where the police automatically believed her as being the victim and not Andy.
I think as well, when I was reading it, Andy's helplessness, I found that quite disturbing as well, because you're right, where is the support? Where could he go? Who could he tell? And this is all, he couldn't even, he knew that his brother and his mother had previously, they hadn't approved of his choice. And so he couldn't go to them, because he would be proving them right. And he just seemed to have no one to turn to. And that's why, like you, I thought he might open up to his colleague who had a similar experience. And he felt just so lost, with nowhere to go. And then, but wanting the best for his son, and that conflict, I think, between what he thought he was doing for his son and what he was prepared, it's maybe, so the previous book that we talked about was a lot about boundaries, and this obviously is as well. It's what will you put up with in order to get what you want in life, or what you think you want in life. And he was prepared to an extent to sacrifice quite a lot to give his son what he thought was needed.
Alex, what did you think of this book?
This is a really interesting book for me, because the time I read it for the second time, actually, I was reading it as part of research for a book around the subject, and I covered different angles of DV, but this was one of the hardest ones, because it wasn't just the main character that you got the impact from. It's his kids and his work colleagues, and even different angles, the homophobia and all the different ways that Michael covered within this book. There's just so many elements that you wouldn't think of automatically, and the way that she turned on him so violently and so graphically. Would anyone think that? Just a completely different angle. And Michael himself has written articles on toxic masculinity, and when he was talking to me, I found it so difficult to tell me about what he thought about things, because it's such a hard topic for people to realise, and they don't realise how how prevalent it is in society. It's a hard one, and they get me rather emotional at times. I won't lie.
For me, I think the contrast with the first book that we reviewed, we had a lot of characters in that book who are in a way exciting, larger than life. You know, these are the rich, young, pretty things. What we have in Alan is a very ordinary man, a man from the west of Scotland, somebody we can all, at least, you know, the panelists we can all identify with people like that. And I think for me, one of the strengths of this book was just the character of Alan, the way that Michael has drawn this character who is it could be anybody we meet down the street. And yet there is so much going on, you know, within, and maybe that's why this is such a difficult book to read, because this is eminently believable. This is happening out there, and as you rightly said, Sharon, we don't give it enough. We don't give it enough credence. There is a stigma attached to domestic violence towards men. But for me, what Michael's done in this book is he's created two characters who are so ordinary, yet so rich and vivid, and so eminently believable. As you said, you know, you don't know whether, I think we do feel sorry for Anna to a degree because she's got issues. I mean, we obviously feel extremely bad for what's happening to Alan, but we can understand it. For me, it was the treatment of Anna and the fact that we don't know what to think there, which was extremely powerful. I'm going to read out some of the comments from our readers. Angela Martin says she loved this book. Louise Colvin says lots of men feel that they would not be believed, and this came across as a heavy subject. You actually felt the pain for him, and I agree with that completely. You did, you felt it. Sue Monroe says she thought the ending was a bit disappointing, but she couldn't put it down, even though it was a difficult topic. Jane Harvey says, a great read, and we really got into his head and his darkest thoughts. Angela says, I thought it was very thought-provoking. I also had to put the book down a few times to catch my breath. I think that's something that's coming through. We all struggled with this sort of the emotions, with our own emotions in this book. Is that the mark of a writer, well, a truly great writer, somebody who forces us to keep going, even though we have to put it down, just because we are so invested in it?
I think.
Sorry, Shanna.
No, you go.
I thought it was so thought-provoking. And I would agree with you that is the mark of something really special, is to make you, for an author to be able to make you stop in your tracks. There's a difference between a book that makes you turn the pages and a book that makes you think, and the book lives on with you for a very long time after it. And I think that for me, this book is one of those books that I have, when I've been talking about it with other people, and I've kept asking about this question of why was I so affected by it, so affected by those scenes that snap into the violence and his gradual, just that spiral that he went into. So yeah.
I think we're kind of affected because we're conditioned by society to think that, you know, men should be strong, men shouldn't cry, men aren't weak, we're conditioned, and no matter, you know, how much we fight against that conditioning, I think there's still that element that makes people really uncomfortable when they come across this situation. And I think, Abir, you're right, it's the characters are so relatable. It could be your next door neighbour, it could be somebody you're working with, and you just don't know what's going on in people's lives. But I think he's a really powerful writer. I think this book really raised a lot of valuable issues and topics. And as I say, I would be on my soapbox till I fell asleep tonight if I kept on going on. So,
Alex, any thoughts on the character of Alan? I mean, he is, as we've said, he's an everyman. He works in a bank. He's the person you'll meet down the shops.
The fact that he works in a bank and Michael's made him so normal. makes it more scary, I think. And also the fact that Alan is the kind of guy that has had to put up with it up front, because in other books on the subject they kind of use the female and male violence as a twist kind of thing, and you only find that out near the end. So the fact that the fact that the violence is up front and shocking makes this a more braver book than other books in the genre, because of how it's tackled in front of the reader's face. So they may have to put the book down because it's so difficult.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is not a twist. This is something that is up there front and center. It's the topic of the book. It's the subject, and he deals with it, so deftly that it comes across as a very difficult read, but a very powerful read. So I'm going to ask my question: how many thumbs are you each giving this one? Let's go. Let's start with you, Fiona. How many thumbs? 2 thumbs. Alex, what do you think? 1, 2, 1.5?
Well, it's got to be 2 thumbs, but I'm just going to keep my hands folded, because if I try and keep 2 thumbs, we'll be here all day.
Okay, Sharon, what did you think? What's your vote for it?
2 thumbs and 2 big toes from me.
Oh my words! Okay, so this we have a book which is extremely popular is the wrong word, because it was a difficult book to read, but it's definitely an important book, and one we think you should read, because it's an insight into something which is very important and into a subject that isn't tackled very often. So yeah, I think I would agree with our panelists on this one. Definitely one to pick up and give a shot, give a try. Right, let's move on to our third book of the night. We have Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. Now, this book has been an international hit. It's been in the bestseller charts for, best part of 6 months, I think. And it's a sensation. So let me tell you a wee bit about it. Sally Diamond cannot understand why what she did was so strange. She was only doing what her father told her to do, to put him out with the rubbish when he died. Now Sally is the centre of attention, not only from the hungry media and police detectives, but there's also a sinister voice from a past she can't remember. As she begins to discover the horrors of her childhood, Sally steps into the world for the first time, making new friends and big decisions and learning that people don't always mean what they say. But who is the man observing Sally from the other side of the world? And why does her new neighbour seem to be obsessed with her? Sally's trust issues are about to be severely challenged. So let's hear from Liz Nugent herself.
Put me out with the bins, he said regularly. When I die, put me out with the bins. I'll be dead, so I won't know any different. You'll be crying your eyes out. And he would laugh, and I'd laugh too, because we both knew that I wouldn't be crying my eyes out. I never cry. When the time came, I followed his instructions. He was small and frail, and 82 years old by then, so it was easy to get him into one large garden waste bag. It was a month since he'd been up and about. No doctors, he said. I know what they're like. And he did, because he was a doctor of psychiatry. He was still able to write prescriptions, though, and would send me to Roscommon to get those filled out. I didn't kill him, it wasn't like that. I bought him in tea that morning, and he was cold in his bed. Eyes closed, thank God. I hated on those TV dramas when corpses stare up at the detective inspector. Maybe you only have your eyes open if you've been murdered? Dad, I said, though I knew he was gone. I sat on the end of the bed, took the lid off his beaker and drank the tea, missing the sugar I put in mine. I checked his pulse first, but I could tell by the waxiness of his skin, only waxy isn't the right word. It was more like his skin didn't belong to him anymore, or he didn't belong to it. Dragging the waste bag across the yard to the barn was hard. The ground was frosted, so I had to heave the bag up onto my shoulder every few minutes, so that it wouldn't rip. Once a month, when he was well, Dad would empty the bins into the incinerator. He refused to pay the bin charges, and we lived in such a secluded spot that the council didn't chase us for it. I knew that corpses decomposed and began to rot and smell, so I carefully placed the bag into the incinerator barrel. I splashed some petrol over the top and set it going. I didn't stay to hear it burn. He was no longer he. It was a body, an it, in a domestic incinerator, beside a barn, in a field, beside a house, at the end of a lane, off a minor road.
What an opening, eh? There aren't many books that start with a woman putting her dad out in the trash. Alex, I think it's up to you to get started on this one.
Well, it's a very sedate start to something that is also so graphic. I think Liz is brilliant at doing that, because you never know where she's going to go with it. It's just, you know, her way of describing stuff is amazing, because you can take something that would gross most people out and make it sound so normal. Shelley Diamond is dealing with some range and unusual topic areas, like how you were brought up, and the sensitive way in which neurodiversity has been dealt with in this book makes me pleased to have read it, not just for this, but for other things too, because it was something that I had to get on the day it came out, because I've been because I've been hearing so much about it. But when I was given the option to read it for this group as well as my own work, it meant that I was able to bring it up my list, and I was really pleased to see that she was still as dark as ever. But when you go to New Zealand as well, the way that Liz describes different locations around the world and makes those locations part of the story, the isolated nature of both the Irish side and the New Zealand side make the story for me, especially when you take into account the other character that narrates the story. I won't go into any more into that because I don't want to ruin it for people. But I think that the fact that Liz can switch narration between characters is one of the skills in all her books I've found so far. And I would say that if you haven't read this yet, you need to, because it is deservedly still close into the top of the audio 100 and will probably be there all year long, I think.
I would agree with that. You touched on a couple of things there. Isolation, but before that, let's talk a bit about neurodiversity. Who wants to talk about the character of Sally Diamond? Fiona, would you like to say a few words? What did you think of the book? And
I sorry, I'm like a broken record. I really enjoyed it. One that I might have found on my own. It certainly didn't take me where I was kind of expecting it. It's dark and there's a lot of very serious topics within it, but there's also a humour in it as well that I think allows you, it's that there's a lightness of touch in the writing that, and you can hear it in her voice when she was reading it out loud. And it was actually really great to hear her reading it, because now if I go back to read it again, I'll hear her voice in my head, and it'll add that extra just little lift of light. And I think that lift of light is what makes, it's what makes this darkness of the story, and it is a very dark story, even darker. You've got the two things together. I was fascinated by the role of her parents and the sort of the relationship there, and how they came to be there, and then the sort of the way that the father ruled the roost and the way that she was brought up, and how much of the strangeness of Sally, how much of that was within her and how much was made by the way that she was brought up. And I think that controlling factor of the father, and you get the glimpses through the aunt of how she might have been brought up differently, and would Sally have been different? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's one of the fundamental questions, because you start out thinking this character is neurodivergent, but I became less convinced of that as we went through the book because of what we learn. But she tackles it. I mean, I should point out I have a son who is neurodivergent, and for me it was fascinating to read her description of Sally. She deals with it, very tenderly, very, very, very lightly, and very gently, and it was very powerful for me in that respect. Yvonne Stanton says, a great book. I felt very protective of Sally. And I think to a degree, that's how I felt as well. Yvonne says, I so wanted her to have a happy ending, even though I could see she was so deeply traumatized by her childhood and she was probably never going to be able to live a normal life. Because we do get glimpses of that. As you say, there is light there, Fiona. There's a part of the book where you think everything's going to work out for Sally, and then the darkness descends again. Sharon, what did you make of the book?
Loved it, absolutely loved it. But a bit like you, Fiona, I feel like a bit like a broken record here. But Liz Nugent could write her shopping list, and I would love it. She's a fantastic writer, and if anybody can open a book with a twist and a bang, it's her. She does it every time. She just perfected it. I get all that about Sally, and I think for me, I thought there was a lot of that. Was it more the environment as opposed to neurodiversity there? And I think I think she created that character so well, because at the beginning you're not quite sure, like, right, what's going on here? Somebody's put their dad out the rubbish, and part of you's like, you want to laugh because that's so ridiculous. And then there's a few incidents within the village that the book could have went a very different way and made Sally quite a vulnerable, weak character. But for me, there was a real resilience and a real strength about Sally's character, and a resilience and a strength about the community. So a community who, when hearing what she had done, almost shunned her, to a community that sort of gathered round her to protect her. So for me, as well as the light, I thought there was a real sense of hope and resilience and strength in her character, not taking away what Yvonne was saying there about her traumatic childhood. She was never going to have a normal life after that. But yeah, there's a perfect balance there of light, dark, humour, hope.
Let's talk a bit about the humour, because it's very, very difficult to do humour in such a dark book. And for me, a lot of the humour comes from Sally's sort of matter-of-factness. She just takes everything at face value. And it's a really difficult balance to get right, isn't it? And now, what did you all think of the humour and Sally's character? Because these things too are intertwined, really. I mean, the humour comes from Sally. What did you think of her?
I like the level of self-awareness. Sorry, I'm really sorry to jump in there. I liked that level of self-awareness, that she knew that she was saying things that were strange, that were going to potentially upset people. I really liked that level of awareness throughout.
That was exactly what I was just about to say.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine. No, it was the level of self-awareness and the fact that she was very blunt with people, and if they were bad with her, she would be just as blunt back. And because of the background, she could get away with it being blunt. people knew in the background, and because she could say whatever she wanted, it meant that Liz could add comedy elements in there to shock you when you weren't expecting it.
Now, Sharon, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, I think it was that straightforward talking, and the heavy breathing behind me is my dog, by the way, in case anybody can hear that. It's decided to get needy. 10 minutes to go. I think it was that straightforward talking, and just a matter of fact way. She said, she called a spade a spade. She said what had to be said, and I think that allowed Liz to bring in that humour, because there's a part of you going, oh my God, imagine saying that, and part of you like, oh my God, I'd love to be able to just say that sort of thing. So get again a really, really relatable character, somebody that yeah, I could imagine living next door to strange Sally Diamond and actually getting on with her really well.
I think as well as that great, there's often throughout it, there's the mad things that we all say on a daily basis that we don't even realise what we're saying, and that play with the language and the phrasing and things. I think that was really clever as well. That people are saying things to Sally, and she is being literal with them, but why wouldn't she be? People aren't always honest, or they don't always say exactly the truth. They hide it with words and soften it with words. And I think that was a really clever way of helping Sally to express herself. Well, and I would love to be able to say some of the things that Sally said.
Well, in the end, aren't we the strange ones? She's the straightforward one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's those of us who say one thing and mean another that are the real strangers here. I mean, there's a touching there's a touching side to her as well, where she believes things like, if you tell the truth, nothing bad can happen. That sort of thing that we all know from a very age isn't true. She's never grown out of that, and I think that's part of the warmth that we feel towards her. Alison Campbell says, I absolutely loved this book. Liz Nugent creates such brilliant and unique characters. I almost don't care about the plot. And I think that's true. She's created. It takes a real skill to create a character like Sally Diamond. And for me, Liz is just getting better and better. I want to pick up on something that you said, Alex. We talked about isolation. And we also talked about, that you picked up on, Sharon, which was communities coming together. This isolation and this, is there a link between small communities and this sort of fiction? And is there something special about these small communities where, they do come together?
Isolation allows for great psychological thrillers because it allows for the writer to focus on the mind and all the issues around it. And when you add in, you've also got judgment of those small communities to add into the psychological elements of it. And those two elements alone can make a book, even if there isn't another element of the plot in it. I mean, there is with this because of the way that it's resolved in the second part of the book. With other elements of psychological thriller, if you've only got those, it wouldn't work. I don't know what Sharon and Fiona think about that, but I think that those elements alone are key elements within a psychological thriller.
So you've got this pressure cooker atmosphere of this, the small communities. But as you say, Alex, there's more to this book, and there's more to this community than just a pressure cooker. Sarah, Sharon, any thoughts?
I think, small communities in isolation are brilliant for writers. And I think small communities, coming from a small community and knowing small communities quite well, that communities can rally around people, but I think they can also serve to isolate. Small communities can also serve to isolate, people even more. And I think what happened with Sally, because there was, when she put her dad out in the bin, and then there was incidents. There was a couple of incidents with children approaching her house. It could have turned, another way. And I think what Liz has done there is really cleverly shown that that whole people being challenged about their thoughts and their perceptions and being able to turn, you know, so from the parent, oh my God, don't go near Sally Diamond's house, to actually go and actually we'll go to a party at Sally Diamond's house, you know, yeah, you can come and have Christmas dinner with us and things. So there is something there that for me as a reader, I hope when other people read things that if, you know, that it starts to challenge their ways of thinking. Because I think small communities can be really good places, but they can also be really isolating places as well.
Fiona, I'm going to give you the last word of the night on this book. Anything you want to say about it before we put it to a vote? I
would say read it. Go get it, read it. It's a really great book, and it just these have all been really good books. So let's you know, it's hard to pick and choose. Each of them has had its light and shade, but they're all very worth reading.
Absolutely, I think we're spoiled for choice.
To pick up any of them and give them a go.
The wonderful books. Now, let's put this to a vote. Out of 2, what do you reckon, Fiona?
You always come to me first, and it's a 2.
2.
2 out of 2.
Alex, what do you think?
Well, like Sharon, I think I'm going to have to go for the thumbs and the toes, but I'm not sure how many.
This is your thumbs and toes book. Sharon, what do you think?
Definitely 2 for me. Definitely 2.
So we've had 3 amazing books, and if you haven't read them, please do, because I don't think you won't regret reading any of them. They're all in that top 10% of crime fiction novels you'll read this year. I put money on that. So please do go ahead and pick up a copy if you haven't already. Now, we're out of time, so it just remains for me to say that the next Bloody Scotland Book Club will be in the autumn after Bloody Scotland itself. It'll be in October. So the details will be up on the Facebook page at some time, so please do keep your eye out for those. All that remains now is for me to thank my wonderful panelists, Sharon, Alex, and Fiona. Thank you so much for making this so interesting and so much fun. And to thank you all at home who've been watching and submitting your questions and your comments. The discussion wouldn't have been half as fun without you. Please do tune in to the next episode, which, as I say, will be a few months from now. And in the meantime, stay safe and happy reading.
Thanks, Abir.
Thank you.